12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos by Jordan B. Peterson.
It's taken much longer than I expected to finish all 12 videos for Jordan Peterson's Rules for Life. Every time I make one, I spend ages getting completely immersed in the ideas for that chapter. With just 2 chapters left, I'm starting to really understand what makes his take on things so compelling. I think it's because he combines practical advice with insights and research from a range of fields, including psychology, sociology, history, and political theory. The effect is often novel and insightful. Rule 11, don't bother children when they're skateboarding, is no exception. When I was around 10 years old, I used to go straight home after school, drop off my bag, grab a snack, and head out to play. In summer, my brother and I had to be home by 6 o'clock for dinner. Our mum and dad only had a rough idea of where we were, what we were doing, and who we were with. How things have changed in just 40 years. These days, in the UK at least, many parents don't want to let their kids out of their sight, picking them up from school and shuttling them around various sports practices and play dates, or tracking their exact location using their phone. We seem to be overprotecting our kids. But what are the consequences? One of the things Jordan Peterson keeps coming back to is the innate differences between men and women. He often points out that, on average, men score lower than women for the trait of agreeableness, one of the big 5 personality traits. This means that men, on average, like to take more risks, are more aggressive, and will more readily bend the rules than women. These hardwired male tendencies evolved because they served men well in our evolutionary past, but Peterson believes that today it's having the opposite effect and putting boys and men at a disadvantage. He claims that our increasingly overprotective society is stifling men's development, and that many men, especially in the West, are becoming disheartened. Peterson used to watch kids, boys mostly, skateboarding outside Toronto University. Despite the very real risk of physical injury of their seemingly crazy stunts, they were of course having a great time. How can something so risky, though, also be such fun? The answer lies in the fact that practice and improvement are only possible when you push past your boundaries. And pushing past boundaries means you might not succeed. You might have an accident and get injured, or you might not be able to understand or learn something new. But to have any chance of succeeding, you have to try. You have to risk failure. Failure results in pain, physical or psychological, or both. So becoming better at something is inherently risky. Obviously, we need to get better at stuff, so we therefore have to take risks. And that's why children are hardwired to seek out dangerous play. They're continually looking for the boundary between what they can do and what they can't do, what they know and understand and what they don't know. At that boundary they learn, grow, and improve their competence. Despite the risks involved, it's the safest option in the long run. The skills that we acquire, whether it's learning to drive, learning to empathize with others, or learning to deliver an effective presentation, they can be used to improve our performance in the future. Better performance means a better life and less unnecessary suffering. One day, Peterson noticed that the skateboarders outside the university had gone. On closer inspection, he saw that someone had fixed skate stoppers onto the railings. If the skate stoppers were put there to protect the kids from getting injured, you could argue that it's misguided because the kids will just go somewhere else to practice skateboarding anyway. The intention, though, to protect the kids from injury, would at least be well-meaning. But Peterson suspected that someone at Toronto Council may have put up the skate stoppers to stop them enjoying themselves and to stifle their human spirit for adventure and self-improvement. Done in the name of safety, but actually for sinister and resentful reasons. Peterson notes that Freud, Jung, and Nietzsche, all giants in their field, identified this dark tendency in the human subconscious to resent the success of others. Communism, tries to create an equal society with an even and fair distribution of resources. But when communism was put into practice, in Soviet Russia or Mao's China for example, it resulted in vengeful retribution, murder, needless misery and the death of countless millions of people. Under the Khmer Rouge, the face of communism in Cambodia, a quarter of the country's population perished. Communism is in theory a system to ensure everyone gets a fair share. However, the system doesn't work in practice because it's always hijacked by the same human proclivity for jealousy and resentment of other people's success, which resides in all of us. Communism is a system which looks fair enough in theory, but in practice results in corruption and suffering. In the same way, protecting skateboarders from injury seems reasonable on the surface, but in practice it meant that resentful individuals at Toronto City Council were able to thwart the youngsters from learning and developing competence, and of course having fun. Our overprotective Western society, just like communism, is prone to hijacking by human malevolence and resentment. Peterson's thesis is that Pol Pot lives in the hearts of us all. We all have the potential for resentment and malevolence. It's baked into the human condition. Unlike a certain individual at Toronto City Council, what we must try to do is find the right path, the path of living a good life. Even though the collapse of the Soviet Union meant the end of communism's moral credibility, Western support for communism continued. Academics just changed their worldview from suppression of the poor by the rich to suppression of everyone by the powerful. The fundamental problem with the postmodernist and neo-Marxist view is that everything is understood in terms of just power. Because power is the only variable at play, postmodernists and neo-Marxists have to assume that there are no innate biological differences between different groups of people. For example, they delude themselves that there are no innate psychological differences between men and women. If you accept this premise, then it means that you have to explain the gender differences we actually see in the world as socially constructed. But as we already saw earlier, the data's already in on this. Men and boys are, for example, innately more aggressive, on average, than females. At the extreme end of the Bell distribution curve, all of the most aggressive people are men. There are way more men in prison than women because the most aggressive individuals in society are pretty much all men. A criminal has what is technically known as an antisocial personality disorder. The opposite to this condition is a dependent personality disorder, someone who's too agreeable and has a high neuroticism score. Because women, on average, score higher on both these two big five personality traits, at the extreme end of the bell curve for agreeableness and neuroticism, it's all women. So those with the dependent personality disorder are mostly women. If those women have children, they're very likely to become Oedipal mothers. You might suppose that the more compassionate and caring a mother is, the better, but think again. An Oedipal mother smothers her children, doing everything for them. The poor little mites don't learn to stand on their own 2 feet, remaining hopelessly dependent on their mum. They can never leave her. The archetype of the terrible mother embodies the fact that too much protection stifles the development of competence. It can be hard for parents, and in particular mothers, to resist the temptation to overprotect their kids. But resist they must, so that they can become strong and independent. As well as for individuals, this also holds true at the collective level. We've now come full circle, back to the Toronto skate stoppers. Jordan Peterson sees young people's growth and development being stifled as we become an overprotective, Oedipal society. To succeed in the harsh reality of the world, you have to be tough and competent. If you notice something about yourself which is inadequate, you should do something about it, and you're no longer quite so inadequate. You thereby have a path and a way forward through life, one of self-improvement. To prevent someone from doing something because it's too dangerous may seem justifiable on the surface, but in reality it can be stifling and have a deeply anti-human spirit. Society needs resilient and competent individuals. Interfering with this development is bad for the individuals concerned and counterproductive for society as a whole. Right, so, as well as being a fascinating romp through historical events and socio-political ideas, what can you take away from Rule 11 in practical terms? Well, if you're over 25, say, and still living at home and you feel that your parents are wrapping you in cotton wool, then for your own good, and theirs, you should break free, take some risks, and learn to stand on your own 2 feet. It's definitely going to be hard and probably painful, but not doing it will be way more painful in the long run. It's the only path to self-improvement and reaching your goals and dreams. If you're a parent, is it possible that you're being too protective of your kids? Even though you might be motivated by all the good intentions in the world, try stepping back. You're at risk of doing them a disservice if you don't. Being a good parent is all about putting yourself out of a job. You've got to let them go. Let your kids take their chances out there so they can build resilience and competence to survive on their own. On a collective level, we should stop overprotecting our youngsters. For example, let's just let them practice skateboarding. Let's forget about creating safe spaces at universities. And let's stop deplatforming speakers on university campuses in the name of protecting students from corruptive ideas, to name a few. Otherwise, 20 years from now, we'll be overrun by inept, simpering and resentful young adults, overly dependent on the mollycoddling society which spawned them. Rule 11. Don't bother children when they're skateboarding. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and please subscribe for upcoming videos. Thanks for watching.